Today we are going to be looking at the cheat codes for the French exam, and we are going to specifically look at the paper 2 contextual dialogue. Just a reminder, for the contextual dialogue, you have a word limit of 80 to 100 words, and you will be graded out of 20. So here are your cheat codes. Do not go beyond 100 words. You actually will not be graded beyond that point. There may be a slight leeway, but I would recommend that you stick to the 100 word limit. The next thing you need to be mindful of is to write logical, clear, and appropriate sentences. You want to ensure that you have grammatical correctness and there's a variety of vocabulary being used as well as idioms. So in order to get 13 to 50 marks in the contextual dialogue, you have to use at least 4 cues well, organize and develop your ideas or your responses using good French. And good French is French that is clearly expressed, which has correct grammar, which uses a range of vocabulary and structures, and of course, few errors. However, to score maximum points, which is a 16 to 20 mark range, you have to write logical, clear, and appropriate sentences and use all cues well. You need to develop your ideas and responses in a clear and coherent manner and use a wide variety of vocabulary, idioms, and structures. And of course, the errors must be minimal to extremely rare. All right, so let's look at an example. Mr. Dumont comes home one evening just in time to see someone leaving his garden. He goes to the police station to make a report. Responses to all of the cues listed below must be included in the completed dialogue. And here we have 5 cues. First one is that you must have a reason for going to the police station written out. You must show the description of the burglar, the items discovered missing, give information about a possible suspect, and lastly, what measures would be taken to prevent future theft. Complete the dialogue in the insert provided. The completed dialogue should be attached to your answer booklet. Okay, so this is using the somewhat traditional format. This is what your sample exam should look like, without all the images, of course. We're looking at the responses. So we have a dialogue where I have highlighted in orange everything the police officer says. So what Mr. Dumont says is everything the student wrote. And we'll have a little discussion on the dialogue. So l'agent says, "Calmez-vous, monsieur, qu'est-ce qu'il y a?" Calm down, sir. What's the matter? So Monsieur Dumont says, j'ai vu une personne qui part de mon jardin. C'est un homme. So I saw a person leaving my garden. It's a man. So the police officer says, l'agent says, et qu'est-ce que vous avez fait? What did you do? Monsieur Dumont says, après, j'ai cherché pour mes choses dans mon jardin et quelque chose ont manqué. After I looked for my things in my garden, and some things have gone missing. That's what person intended to see. The student intended to see. So the l'agent says, décrivez cette personne. Monsieur Dumont says, il est mince et grand. L'agent says, et qu'est-ce qui manquait chez vous? Monsieur Dumont says, cet homme a prendu les bananes et les pastèques. Now, when l'agent says, et qu'est-ce qui manquait chez vous? What's missing? What are you missing? Or what has been stolen in this context? And so the Monsieur Dumont is saying, the man took bananas and watermelons. However, of course, we're seeing some grammatical errors, some of which you may be able to point out in the comments section. Okay. All right. So we're continuing. L'agent says, et quoi d'autre? And what else? Monsieur Dumont says, aussi, il a prendu 5 tomates. So Mr. Dumont says, also, he took 5 tomatoes. L'agent says, pensez-vous savoir qui c'est? Do you think you know who it is? And Monsieur Dumont responds, mon amie qui travaille près de mon jardin, je pense qu'elle sait. Elle s'appelle Madame Pierre. My friend who works close to the garden, to my garden, I think she knows. She's called Mrs. Pierre. Her name is Mrs. Pierre. So the l'agent says, et elle a vu le voleur? And did she see the thief? Monsieur Dumont says, oui, c'est parce que j'ai vu Madame Pierre quand j'ai rentré chez moi. Yes, because I saw Mrs. Pierre when I got home. So l'agent says, alors, qu'est-ce que vous allez faire pour éviter une telle chose? So what are you going to do to avoid this thing in the future, this type of theft in the future? And Monsieur Dumont says, je vais acheter une caméra de surveillance. And that's it for the dialogue. So what I want you to check is whether Monsieur Dumont's additions to the dialogue is within the 80 to 100 range. Remember, the students will lose marks if it is over, let's say, 110 words. But we're sticking to the 100 limit, after which the dialogue from the student will not be read, it will not be considered. Right, so you're penalized for going beyond the word limit. The second thing we want to look at is the grammar or the language aspect. What kinds of mistakes are being made? The tense is correctly done. Are there uses of good vocabulary, a variety of vocabulary synonyms? Are we seeing idioms? Are we seeing expressions? French expressions of emotions. So we're looking at language, and we're going to determine how well the student was able to avoid errors. Then we're going to look at the cues. There are a few things that the examiner instructed the students to give information on, such as description of the thief, the items that were being stolen, or the plans to avoid theft in the future. Notice when things are plural. So if he says, if the examiner asks for things that were stolen, you cannot put one thing that was stolen and expect the full complement, the full marks for that response, because you only give one item that went missing. So we want to pay attention to those 3 points: the language, the appropriateness of responses as it relates to the cues, and I forgot one other thing. We want to talk about the word limit, of course, so that would be the 3rd point, but equally important is the coherence. Does the entire dialogue make sense? Is there confusion as to what is happening in the story at certain points? And I will give you a hint. On this very page, things get a little bit confusing, so that students may not fall into the 16 to 20 mark range. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments. Let me see what kind of faults you found, what things you found were done well, and how you would have probably responded to the different cues. All right. Right, I want to thank you for joining, and bonne chance with your études, avec vos études. Okay, see you next time.